Hey guys, welcome back to The Generalist, episode 4. In this episode, I sat down with Cassie. She is an award-winning playwright. We talked about her whole art and how she got to it and how she writes and what she takes from the outside world and from her own internal environment and how she applies it to plays. We talked about some plays that are coming up, so if you want more information on that, either check on the website for the show notes or listen at the end of the podcast. She promotes everything. Go see her play if you have a chance. I've seen her plays. They're really awesome. At least I've seen one play. I mentioned it in the show, and it was great. Quick note, we have a few more episodes that we've already recorded and are going to put out, and some of them already sort of include what I'm about to talk about. But as we go, we're learning more and more what we want to do and how we want to shape the show. So one thing we're going to start doing starting now in terms of recording, and today is May 9th, so after this we're going to focus on doing this as well. I'm going to start the first half of the show mostly talking about the same stuff that we're talking about, what people do, what they enjoy, whatever the main subject is. But then I'm going to switch gears, hopefully smoothly, at some point in the show, maybe halfway, maybe the last quarter, I'm not sure. I still have to play with it to see how it feels when I'm recording. But we're going to switch gears to talk a little bit more about people's personal philosophies as well. And we'll see what shape that takes. I hope you join me for that when it does happen. Thank you so much. Welcome to The Generalist. Enjoy the episode. Welcome to The Generalist. A show with a man who knows very little bit about a lot. A man who specializes in nothing in particular. A man who knows that he knows nothing. A man who can be described as non-specific. And to top it off, he narrates his own intros. This is The Generalist with your host, Saul Ackerman.
Wait, can we do this with Godzilla on the table?
Yeah, where's Godzilla?
Okay. Thank you.
We absolutely must have a Godzilla on the table for this entire recording.
You know I am the dinosaur stage manager.
Yeah, I don't really know what's going on with that, but in all your Instagram pictures you have a dinosaur.
Yeah, DinoSM. It's a Boston stage management hashtag.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started
put
it.
him right there. Welcome to The Generalist.
Hi.
Thank you for coming on. I'm sitting here with Cassie, who is a award-winning playwright, stage manager. No? Am I wrong about everything?
No. You're on the right track.
Oh,
There's
you're
more.
shaking your head. Oh, you tell me.
Just the award winning. I'm always just kind of like, nah.
Well, have you ever won an award?
I have.
She's award-winning. That's legit.
Yeah, playwright, stage manager, and now producer, visual artist. I'm just kind of doing it all.
That's pretty awesome. All right, let's just start by asking you what got you into playwriting in the first place, or where did the whole adventure start? Let's not start necessarily a playwright because I've known you for a while, and I know that's not where it all started.
Well, since I was a little kid, I've been making a lot of stories up, sometimes to get other people in trouble, in the form of lying. But I've always had a pretty big imagination, and I've been doing theater pretty much since I was 7 years old. I started stage managing actually at 11, Camp Seneca Lake.
Camp Seneca Lake, that's right.
Yep. First show I ever stage managed, I think, was Les Mis, which is kind of crazy when I tell that to people and myself. Yeah, and then I was doing theater, and I was doing theater for a while, and I thought, oh, maybe I'd be an actor. And then I found out I was not very good at being an actor, and
I want to hear that story because that sounds like fun.
Oh, well, I played Lola in Damn Yankees when I was 16, and that was like the lead, and she's supposed to be like sexy and stuff, and I'm kind of socially awkward in the best of ways, and I, did the show, and it was also at camp, so there was a lot of like, oh my god, like, what?
Right.
And I'm just gonna put this on silent over here. So yeah, so I did this performance, and afterwards, this guy who was in the movie Keeping the Faith, actually, who went to our camp, Sam Goldberg, he was very cool. He came up to me and he was like, "You were good in the play," and I was like, "I'm never gonna do this again."
Because a guy who was actually in a movie told you that you were good?
Well, sort of, but also it was just like, I much rather be behind the screen. You know the screen. I'm watching you look at the screen. I'd much rather be behind the scenes, and behind the words at this point, making the magic happen, than being on stage and being looked at by people. Like, every time I have to go up and, like, make a speech or an announcement or stuff like that, I'm always just like, people are looking at me.
I've only ever really seen you, I think I've only ever seen you in one play, which was in a remake of The Three Musketeers.
Oh, God.
That was, would you say avant-garde? I don't even know what to call it.
Sure. Yeah, and I wasn't even supposed to be in that. I was the stage manager, but the company required me to be in it.
And you played a turkey head? Is that correct? Or just
no, I was just a head on the table.
A head on the table.
Yeah, no, I was also I think my title was lead bad guy because I was doing I was like the assistant fight choreographer for the show.
That was cool. I saw you doing at the beginning when you walked in. You guys were doing stage fighting, and that was really, really cool. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, that was a long, long time ago.
That was early on in your career, I would say.
Yeah. I don't even like to talk about that show. That show is ancient history. That's
okay. The one play that I have seen that you wrote was As Though I Shut Door Open, correct?
Yep.
Which was an unbelievable play.
Thank you.
Which I know you're re-releasing soon, right?
Yeah, we are remounting in the terms of theater.
Remounting. See, I learned things.
Yeah, learning things. We are remounting the show this May. It's going to be May 12th through 26th in Somerville, Massachusetts. So it was in Roxbury, which is part of Boston, and now we're moving just a little further, closer to Cambridge for this location.
How do you get started writing? I feel like a lot of people feel like they could be writers, but they can't. Yeah. For example, yours truly, me.
Yeah.
That's my new thing. I like saying yours truly and then making it clear that I'm talking about
myself.
Not
like yours truly, Godzilla, who's sitting here on top of the audio M track.
Because Godzilla can't talk, so I might be talking for him.
That's true. It's very true. I mean, that's a huge question. I mean, I went to grad school, and I think that kind of whipped me into shape on like how to actually.
For what?
So I went to Lesley University for my MFA in writing for stage and screen. It's a creative writing MFA, but then you have like a specialty. You pick a track.
How does that differ from say writing a book?
Well, that is a great question. So that's what I was actually doing in undergrad. I was a fiction major in the creative writing department at Brandeis University, where I went for my undergraduate degree. And I was writing novels, and that's what I always thought I was going to do. And then it was kind of like a light bulb when someone was like, hey, you're a theater major studying stage management, and you've got this other major in writing fiction. Why don't you marry those two things and write a play? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about it. And they're like, no, do it. And I wrote my first play, which is my play Runner, the Novel, the Play, which is an adaptation of my novel. An adaptation, words, of my... I never said I could speak. I could write. I can't speak.
More thinking involved.
I know. There's a lot of thinking. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, like, brain to mouth translation.
Yeah. Well, you don't have to tell me.
But, yeah, so... I was like, okay, and I made my novel into a play, and I finally got to see my characters like live and breathe through actual people, and I learned so much more about the people I was writing about by having other people kind of wear them.
Was it really enjoyable to see that happen?
It was amazing. It was such a cool experience.
Do you think that the actors sometimes bring out things in the character, which is sort of what I think you're telling me, but they sort of bring out things in the character
totally.
That you're like, oh wow, I want to add that to that character. I never thought that.
Yeah, I've had that experience a lot. I've worked with this guy, Tony Rios, for a while, and I have a couple characters in some of my older work, not as much of my new work, where I was like, oh man, like, this kid, he's Latino, and I was like, oh, I want to add that, like, I'm going to add some Spanish to this character, just because it's like, that was the actor I was working with, and I was like, oh, that's so interesting. Or other stuff, I mean, I think I was recently working on something where, like, the character, like, the actor was able to do, like, something sort of acrobatic, and I was like, oh, maybe I'll just, like, write that in for this particular production. But I think every actor, just like any person does to anything, like brings something different to the table. What's really exciting about a play is that it can get done a bunch of times. Like I have this show that's going up right now, actually, in Rhode Island. Yes, Rhode Island. And
yes, Rhode Island.
Yes, Rhode Island. It's going up at Community College of Rhode Island, and it's been going. This is its eighth production. So there have been 8 different people who have played the role of the character Moose, and 8 people who've then played Salty, who's the other character in the play. And I love names. Names are fun. And
yeah, I feel like that in itself is already really hard to come up with. You're like, oh, what am I going to use? And do you feel like when you're writing names of characters, obviously not like Salty, who doesn't necessarily remind you of a specific person, it may, but when you're writing names or you're using common names, I should say, that you go, oh man, I shouldn't use that name because that person's going to think I'm talking about them when I'm not. or that person's going to know I'm talking about them when I am.
Every once in a while, I'll like pull someone's name from real life, or I tend to pick more obscure names, like in general. In I Shut Door Open, the characters are Palmer and Turner, which are not normal names you hear all the time.
That's true.
And it's because, actually, I was once lost in Westchester. I was driving. This was before the days of GPS, and I had to, like, go into the backseat of my car and pull out, like, one of those old maps. And I was lost at the crossroads between Palmer Street and Turner Street. And I was like, oh, my God, that is, like, what an interesting place to be. Like, those are great names. And I, like, jotted them down in my notebook. And then, like, 5 years later, when I was thinking of these characters that I wanted to write for this play, I was like, oh, I wonder if these are Palmer and Turner Street. Like, these are these brothers with these, like, weird names. And then what does it mean to be Palmer, someone who holds something in, and Turner, someone who turns away?
Oh, that's so interesting.
Right?
I didn't even think about that.
Right? And then now, because you've seen the play,
having seen the play, that sort of plays on it. It makes sense.
Right.
Do you how much from your surroundings or your relationships with people do you put into plays, or is it just something completely from your mind and all internal things, or both?
It's a good combination of both. Right now I'm really focused, and I think like the past couple of years I've been really focused about writing about trauma recovery, as someone who has post-traumatic stress disorder and deals with my own trauma and trauma history. I'm really interested in exploring that on the stage, because I actually think it's just really relatable, even though when you say it, you're like, PTSD, people are like, oh, only people who are like in a war have that, or whatever.
Right, absolutely.
But so I've been really interested in exploring. I think trauma in art is always interesting. I mean, you look back on like Van Gogh, and like the trauma that he was going through in his own relationships came out with like some of the most beautiful work. So I'm interested in that. So I feel like a lot of my work has kind of been in different ways surrounding about it. From I Shut Door Open, you know that play has to do with some of that stuff. So that's like the bigger picture stuff that kind of comes from my own life, even though, you know, there's a lot of other stuff in my work that's very fantastical and stuff that, you know, I kind of thank God have never happened to me.
Yes, of course.
But there's a lot, I mean, there are little things, especially in my short plays. A lot of my short plays have come from, like, things I've seen or conversations I've witnessed, or just, like, random situations where I'm like, that would make a good play. Although I hate when someone's like, oh, this thing just happened to me, and it would make a great play. And I'm like, no.
I know, I've seen people say that to you when I see your facial expression when that happened.
Well, because it's so hard to explain. I mean, it's something that we learn, and in grad school they, like, kind of teach us, and you go to, like, pitch sessions, you learn how to do this too, and now I'm in a fellowship, and it's the same thing. They're like, okay, you know, learn how to pitch your play. Because even so, like, if you can't describe your play succinctly, or your screenplay especially, in under 3 minutes, that's it, you're done. I mean, the real thing is you got, like, 1:30 to give me, like, a complete idea of what you're writing. And
interesting.
Yeah, so it's like part of this whole, like, log line culture, which is, you know, you look at like a motion picture, you know, a big motion picture, and it's like, after running away from her family, a woman finds herself in a magical land and must embark on a journey with three strangers to find the way home, right?
It's like one of those IMDb descriptions of a movie.
Yeah, that's The Wizard of Oz, right? Woman runs away from her family.
I did not catch that at all.
I know. But I mean, I wasn't being very specific. But if you break it down, that's what The Wizard of Oz is. I mean, I wasn't saying, like, and she lands in the magical land of Oz. But, like, it's... Sometimes, and it's really hard. I do it with my own work, especially in the beginning of a process.
I can imagine that's really difficult to do.
Yeah, I have documents on my computer. I do this thing called the creative prep, which I learned how to do in grad school from my mentor, Jamie Branley, who's a fantastic playwright and TV writer and screenwriter. But she, she has you basically do this. It's not an outline. It's just like gets everything in your head kind of out on the page, and you can kind of see what's, shit and what you want to keep. But because of it, I just have pages and pages of, like, this is a play about blah. This is a play about blah. And it's I'll write it 100 times until I figure out what is this a play about. Because I think one of the most dangerous things about sitting down to write a play is having no idea what you're doing. And not, like, no idea what you're doing, like, not knowing how to type. I mean, that's another problem. But Like,
yeah, well, that's an issue altogether,
right? But not knowing what your story's about. And so as someone, like, I read a lot of scripts, and I read for competitions and stuff like that, and it's a great way to learn about your own writing, because you can see through someone else's writing, and you're 30 pages in, right? You have to read the whole script.
Yeah.
And you're 30 pages in, and you're like, I don't know who this play is about, or what this play is about. Like, is it about this guy? Is it about his sister? Is it about that thing that happened in the past? Or is it about, like, the thing they heard on the news? Like, what is the story about? And for an audience, you don't want an audience to be sitting there watching your play wondering, what is this about? Or who am I supposed to follow right now?
Right, yeah, that makes sense.
You know, like, and especially as a reader, because unfortunately the way the world works, you know, there are gatekeepers in the world, and your work has to go through someone else, and before it gets, like, you know, the check mark and approved, and maybe, you know, getting a production or a reading or something. So there are people who are reading your play, and if there's something on your page that either drops me out, like if I start thinking about, oh, like, I need to get, like, eggs and milk, and I need flour, like, if I'm thinking of my laundry list of things to do, and I'm not fascinated in turning each page, then you've lost me.
Absolutely. The thing that fascinates me even more than writing a story, which is already fairly fascinating, where people are able to just write a story out of nowhere, and I've tried to write for fun, not for anybody else. Not particularly good at it, as I said earlier. But writing dialogue to me is the most interesting thing. How do you come up with a conversation from two different points of view, and how do you do that process? Because that's fascinating to me.
I'm not gonna say I know anything about schizophrenia, but sometimes, and not to be insensitive, but sometimes I do feel like there. You know, I have to hear the voices. I find that I have the hardest time writing someone if I don't hear their voice, if I don't, like, feel them, and I write a lot of not so pleasant people. I write a lot of assholes, and every once in a while someone's like, oh, well, you know, how do you, like, get in their head? And I'm like, I don't know, I just kind of have to go there, and it's this weird place to go. The best exercises I've done for dialogue, and that I've learned so much, is, like, just sitting in a coffee shop and just transcribing what I'm hearing around me.
Really? That's interesting.
Oh, yeah. It was a assignment I had to do in college, and since then, you know, I do it. I've done it a lot on the bus. Like, I'll just listen, and I think that's a really cool thing about writers, and I've found in common with a lot of other writers, is that, like, we're huge life spies. I'll be watching someone, like, getting off the bus, and I'm like, oh, what's that person's story? Like, what's going on with them? Or I'll hear a couple fighting, you know, on the train or at a restaurant, or, like, my husband and I went out the other night, and we were at dinner, and there was this couple, they were sitting across from each other, and one of them is talking about Hawaiian food, and he's going on and on about Hawaiian food, and, like, how there aren't enough Hawaiian restaurants in Boston, which seems really bizarre, because why would there be so many Hawaiian restaurants? But also
probably true.
But probably true. I don't even know of one Hawaiian restaurant. And he's going on about this, and the woman across from him is talking about her dog. And they're clearly on a date, or they're a couple, and, like, he's talking about these Hawaiian restaurants, and she's like, oh, and then he just put his head in the bag of chips, and he just looked at me, and he knew he was doing something wrong. And I was like, these two people are having two separate conversations, and they're sitting across from each other, and they're talking to each other. It's not like one of them's on the phone. Right. And it's like, well, what does it say about that relationship or these people? Like, what's going on with and that's where my brain starts going, you know. And on the other side of us, there was this, like, really douchey guy who was also clearly on a date, and he turns to we're at a Japanese restaurant, like a very traditional restaurant, and he turns to the waitress, and he's like, so you don't have Kung Pao chicken, right? And she just looks at him like, no, we don't have that, like, you know. And
why would we even?
And he's like, oh, well, I'll have some of those gyoza, you know, gyoza.
Yeah, gyoza.
But, like, and he was like, gyoza, and she was just kind of like, okay. And, like, I felt like this guy was sitting there, and he was, like, kind of trying to impress the girl that he was with, being like, oh, yeah, you know. And she was just kind of like, okay. Like, you could tell that she was like, this guy's kind of being a dick, isn't he? Like, he's at a Japanese restaurant, and he's like, you don't have Kung Pao chicken?
Yeah, I find it interesting. A lot of times, people are being dicks, and I don't think they're being dicks in any way whatsoever on purpose. I think they think they're acting totally normal.
Oh, yeah.
And they're being dicks. And that's interesting to me because I wonder...
Well, there's the playwright Neil LaBute, who is a playwright that I really respect his work, and I find it really, I find the language really interesting. And he writes this very hyper-real language. And a lot of his characters, like, people are like, oh, the men in his play are all douchebags. Like, they're all assholes. They're not. There's usually one, like, person who you're like, oh my god, that guy's, like, the worst. But sometimes, like, they say these terrible things, and you can judge them so easily and be like, oh my god, that guy's such an asshole, like, he's so ignorant. Or you can be like, oh my god, Neil LaBute is such a chauvinist, or whatever. And it's like, no. He is portraying this person. Right? He's writing this person. This person might be talking and not thinking, I'm being an asshole right now. You know, we have friends like that who say a lot of things.
Totally.
Who, you know, they don't realize that at the moment they actually sound like a total jackass. They're just saying something that to them seems...
Well, the worst of them do.
Well, yeah.
You know what I find interesting? Sometimes I see people doing things that are sort of assholey, but in a weird way where they're assholey by not noticing that they're ignoring other people around them. And again, not on purpose. They're just doing something kind of without realizing all the repercussions that are coming from it.
Oh, yeah.
And then I go, that person's an asshole. For a second in my head, I tend to go like, or not that person's an asshole, but that person doesn't even realize what they're doing. And then I wonder, how often do I do that where I don't realize what's going on around me?
Well, there's, and then this will get back to, you know, how I write things. But there's, when I was actually in grad school, there was an event. I know, I just keep hitting things and the mic picks it up.
No, I just keep on looking to see, I'm looking at time and stuff, so don't worry about it. If I'm looking up at the screen, I'm looking for sound and I'm looking for time. It has nothing to do with you.
Okay, you're not like checking your NASDAQ. I don't even know what NASDAQ is. Okay, so okay, so I was in grad school and we have these like after parties at because my grad program was a low residency program, so at the end of the night there'd be like some sort of event hosted by either one of the classes or by, you know, they had a guest reader come in, you know, a guest writer, and they're doing like an event.
Right.
So this woman was just standing in the main doorway to the building. The door is propped open, and she's just standing in the doorway, and there's all these people trying to get into the building to go to this reception. And I was just like, I'm a New Yorker at heart, and, you know, we're out in New England, so sometimes the little New York attitude will come out of me a bit, and I'm just like, hello, it's a door. Like it's a door. You're not supposed to
You just have to be like, hello, it's a door.
I know. You're not supposed to stand in a doorway. Like, it wasn't like she was waiting in line. Not like there were people in front of her. She was just talking to someone and, like, standing in the doorway. And I was like, this is a door. You know, like, that was...
Yeah, no, it's annoying. It happens in New York also.
Yeah.
But in New York, people get pissed easier.
She just turned and gave me this, like, death stare. Later, I'm talking to a friend of mine from grad school who's like, oh, I want you to meet my wife. And he introduces me to this woman. And she looks at me and she's like, oh, we've met. And it's like, that sounds like something that you see on a sitcom, right? Like, that sounds like something totally out of, I don't know, Seinfeld or something like that.
Or like a Friends episode, yeah.
Yeah, Friends, yeah, sure.
I don't know why I went with Friends.
Well, it could be a Friends. It just sounds like a Seinfeld sort of thing. It sounds like a Larry David sort of thing. That's why.
Larry David
that's
sort
why.
of thing.
And Larry David is Seinfeld. So, that's sort of like, and then I'm like, womp womp, that was the person that I just insulted. But then I'll be writing something, you know, and I'll be writing this scene where this person's at a party and they like totally do something like that. I'm like, oh man, that moment. Oh, I gotta channel that moment. And I might not write exactly what it was or how it happened, but I might channel.
But you put the feelings that happened during it into it. I see, that's really interesting.
Yeah, or like other things like word mistakes, right? You know, when Gooby, my brother.
Yeah, well, you have to explain because even though I know, people who are listening to this may have no idea what you're talking about.
So my brother once, I don't remember what it was. He was like, "You make so many word mistakes," but he was basically trying to say that I, or whoever, I don't remember, had made a word mistake, had said something wrong, and then by trying to like call us out on it, he also said something like completely weird.
I remember what it was now.
Yeah.
You had said something weird. I don't remember. You said something in a weird way.
That's probably.
And he was making fun of you because of the fact that you're a playwright and a creative writer.
Maybe.
That he's like, you make so many word mistakes, and he said something. He said that, which
and
was...
word mistakes, which like, what is word mistakes? Like, So, and that's in a play of mine. Like, it's actually in a play of mine. Yeah, Word Mistakes. I'm trying to remember which play it's in, but it's in a play of mine, and it's because I'm like, oh man, that is just so funny. But the point is that, like, I'm like, oh, mine. I'm gonna take that little thing. I was at auditions. I have a short film of mine is going into production, so we just had like a 6.5 hour casting session this past Saturday. It's my play, Playing Checkers, which is being adapted into a film. And,
oh, really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
A feature film or like a short film?
It's a short, yeah. It's about 15 minutes long. And
oh,
it's
wow,
actually
that's awesome.
Just also at the same time, I just found out it's going to be produced in the Boston Theater Marathon, which is 53-ish plays in 10 hours. I used to stage manage it for like a couple years. So.
That's going to lead to a follow-up question, but go ahead and finish your story first.
Yeah, so, what was I? Oh, yeah, so I was in casting, and someone told me this story about how they went to a hotel with their wife, and they had requested a room with a king-size bed. It's, it's a hotel, it's vacation. They show up, and it's 2 queens in their room. And they're just like, they got in there.
Were those beds or people?
Oh, they were, yeah. They were queens. They were, yes, queens. No, it was 2 queen-size beds. And they go in, and they both have this moment. They're getting ready for bed, and they look at each other, and they're both like, all right, would it be terrible? Like, they both had the same reaction, like, would it be terrible if we each just took a bed? And they're a married couple, they've been married for a long time, but just that kind of idea, like, oh, to stretch out in a bed in a hotel by yourself.
Totally.
And I was like, sorry guys, I'm stealing that. Like, I'm gonna use that somewhere. It's a great, visual, like, walking, expecting this, like, big king-size bed and it being 2 single beds, and the reaction, instead of being pissed about it, is like, we each got our own bed!
Right, yeah, that's the opposite of what you think is going to happen, kind of thing.
Exactly, and it's
do you ever, I'm trying to remember if it happened in Esda. Esda was a fairly dark play, but do you ever write comedy into your plays?
I do. I mean, there is some comedy in Esda. So
yeah, there was some comedy.
Yeah,
do you ever do like a specifically comedic play?
Yeah, well, a lot of my short plays are comedies, and I think it's because for me, in order to sustain like 120 pages of writing, I really need to have like some gut, some hurt, some like pain to just keep channeling through. I love to kill people in my plays, like
you're like a regular George R.R. Martin.
I just I joke. I'm in a collective called Boston Public Works, and I joke like we all have a little tagline of like it's 7 playwrights, and we have a little tagline about like what our thing is.
Yeah.
And mine is I'm a serial character killer.
That's funny.
One of the other playwrights is like, my plays are long, bring a sandwich. Like that sort of, we have little taglines. But you asked comedy. So a lot of my short plays is where I kind of get to really play with comedy, because comedy is always great when you have a setup, and it's like, especially in a simple setup, My play Occupy Hallmark that I just said is like having its 8th production now is a comedy. It actually won National 10-Minute Play Award, the Gary Garrison Award last year.
Boom.
Yeah, so, but it's a comedy. It's a guy on Valentine's Day is drunk, and he's sitting outside protesting the Valentine's Day, protesting Hallmark, the Hallmark store. And as he's, shouting at people obscenities from the street corner, a girl that used to have a thing for him when he was in elementary school spots him, and they have this, like, really funny, sweet, little weird exchange, and that's pretty much the whole play.
Do you feel like comedy is harder to write, tragedy is harder to write, or they each have different challenges?
I think that for different people, different things are hard to write.
Like, I mean specifically for you.
Oh, specifically for me. Well,
yeah,
because I usually speak for everyone in the universe. I don't know if you know that about me, but I think that for me, comedy is harder to write, and I think it's because a comedy is just difficult. I mean, writing comedy is difficult because you have to kind of write in the rhythm of the comedy, and then you have to also hope that the actors you end up with are really going to be able to bring that out, to bring it out, to bring out the timing, the comic timing. I just had a short film, actually, Donkey Dating. I don't know if you saw it.
I did with the Hillary and Bernie situation.
Yeah. So it's the premises. It's a blind date. It's a setup, and they're both Democrats. It's right now during this crazy election. And one, the female character, Anne, is a huge Bernie. I mean, she feels the burn. And then the guy is a big Hillary supporter, and they're on a date together, and it's just sort of like, mayhem ensues. These like two. I mean, it's not like they just like kind of like the candidate. It's like they're both like...
Yeah, like that's what they're all about.
Yeah, so it's really funny. We're actually in the process, me and the producer of the film, the director, Chris McKenzie, we're in the process of talking about what the sequel would be, depending on how the primaries turn out.
Oh God.
So, but yeah, you can check that out on YouTube. It's Donkey Dating. But yeah, it's really silly. But so that was like I'm not a political writer. I really don't write politics, but I'm already in development for playing checkers with Chris McKenzie, and he was.
Is that also political?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, it's very dark. it's
makes sense.
Yeah, it's a little twisted sibling relationship play, which you could read more about on my website, and that was my NPR voice.
You can read more about it on her website at www. Well, we're actually going to promote you afterward. Don't worry about
great.
You're going to get to promote whatever you want to promote.
It's boobsboobsboobs.com.
Yeah, it's whitehouse.org.
Yeah.
No, .com.
.gov.
Oh, yeah, no. Whitehouse.com was a famously pornographic website. I don't know if it still exists, where everybody would be like, oh, well, go to whitehouse.com to check this out, because people always thought it was going to be a governmental website, and people would always end up in porn.
Did you say governmental?
Is that not a word?
I don't know.
Well, it should be.
It should be.
Because it's a good word.
It's a great word mistake, if not.
Yeah. I like making up words.
Oh, yeah, I do too. Yeah. Candidicial is a word that's...
Ooh, candidicial.
Candidicial.
I like that.
It sounds like it could be a real word, but it's not.
Yeah.
Candidicial.
I used... We were talking about protocols, and I used the word protocolic. Protocolic medicine.
Oh, like alcoholic protocols. Yeah.
So people like
Very
that
nice.
too.
Yes.
Thank you.
Someone...
I feel like that was too much of a build-up for something that was completely worthless to hear.
It's okay, I'll steal it.
By all means, enjoy it.
That's the problem. It really is the problem, is that I just steal things from people, and it's not... I mean, it could be worse. I could be stealing physical things from people. I'm just stealing, like, ideas and...
I mean, you could do both.
You have to be careful around writers. Even, I don't know, I was once talking to another writer friend, and we both had this moment where we both looked at each other and were like, I want to use that. No, I want to use that. Like something came up in the moment, and it was like, oh, it's like, okay, we're both going to do it differently anyway. Right. We're both going to take it. But yes, writing comedy and writing tragedy. I just, I'm a sucker for tragedy. I mean, even in television, like, I love watching comedies. Like, there are comedies that just take me back, but, like, I get, like, sucked in, like, Breaking Bad, like The Walking Dead. I'm just kind of like... Oh my
God, The Walking Dead was amazing this season.
Oh, I haven't seen the finale. Don't say anything.
Okay, I won't tell you. Did you watch Game of Thrones?
No, I don't.
You absolutely must. You would love the amount of tragedy involved.
I know. There's a lot of blood, which I don't
There's
like.
A lot of blood.
But I'm watching The Path right now, which you would love it. It's with Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad.
I never saw Breaking Bad. Yeah, people tell me that I would love that show, but I know,
but you don't like when people tell you what to do. Just like I don't like when people tell me what to write.
That's the thing. People tell me what to do, and I tend to not do it.
I know. It's like when my father gives me things to read, and I'm like, I'm not going to read it now. If you wouldn't have given it to me and I would have found it on my own, I would read it.
Yeah, and by the way, I know I do that, and I realize the stubbornness is the stupidity that I do, but I do it anyway.
Yeah, you can't help it.
I consciously do it.
Consciously.
There's no way to combine those two words. Anyway, yeah. So would you ever consider doing TV or movies?
Well, movies, I mean, I'm doing these short films right now, and I'm really getting into it. And I think with film, a lot of it is finding the right people, like the right people you want to work with. And once you find them, like, you want to just keep working. Like, right now, after doing Donkey Dating and now going into playing checkers, like, I'm like, okay, Chris, like, read my next script. Like, let's go. I have a feature-length, kind of indie film sort of piece that I've been kind of working on for a couple years, and I'd love to have a feature-length film, but I have no desire to move to LA.
Right.
And there is, like, it is difficult.
But I'm sure there is place for television and movies in New York as well. Not that you necessarily want to be in New York either.
Yeah, there definitely is in New York. In Boston, where I am located.
You can work with Matt Damon and
Matt Damon.
What's his name?
Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg. Yeah. I didn't want to say Marky Mark. Not that he's ever going to listen to this, but I feel like he gets insulted when you still call him that.
I don't know. He was just at the Boston Marathon the other day. So,
oh, yeah?
Dressed up as a cop.
Wait, really?
Yeah, they were shooting something. He was not. He wasn't trying to confuse people.
Okay.
He was just...
Because honestly, it's a little bit confusing.
Yeah, I know. You're like, oh, please help me. Oh no, actually, you're Marky Mark. You can help me write a '90s pop song,
or a movie about Boston.
Or a movie about Boston.
How's your mother?
But yeah, I would love to write for TV. I feel like when I watch a show like Breaking Bad, not that I'm like that cool, or when I watch something even like The Path right now, I'm like, oh man, like I could totally write or Shameless. I love Shameless. And I'm like I would so write this. Or Mike and I, my husband, will be watching an episode of Shameless, and Mike's like, oh my god, that is like something you would write. And I'm like, I know.
Would you go out of your way to write for TV? Like, have you sent scripts out?
No, here's the thing about, and this is what I feel in general about writing, spec scripts is what it's called. Like, basically when you're sending out scripts, like let's say I were trying to write for New Girl, right? Which I'm like quirky and very Zooey Deschanel-ish sometimes. So people are like, oh, you should like write for New Girl. You would instead, let's say you would write a spec script for the Mindy Project. Like, that's what you would, and then you would send that. So you're not sending them a spec script.
So a spec script is like a script for a fake episode?
Basically, yeah. Of an existing show. And then usually, maybe you get that in, you send that out, and then they're like, oh, let me see something of yours.
I see.
It's a lot of processing. I mean, the way things work with writers' rooms and stuff like that, it would be really cool to do something like that. But then I look at Aziz Ansari and I see like Master of None, which I
love that show. I thought that was great.
So good. And I'm like, well, that's sort of a smaller, he was kind of doing his own thing. And same with Louis C.K., like with Louis.
Yeah, but they already both had were already really big and had big careers.
Yeah.
Although, you could always pitch something to Netflix, I suppose. They're doing all sorts of things now.
Right. But you can look at, I have a friend who has a really successful web series, My Gay Roommate. And I know him just as he was a Boston actor, and now he has like this whole career.
Oh yeah, you could have people like what are the names from Broad City, who also started with a web series.
Totally, yeah. I was just watching Broad City before we got together, and
it's a great show.
It's so great. And then I actually know a lot of people who do the kind of web series thing. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of, I am a producer, and I'm doing a lot of self-producing of my work as a play. But what I was going back to is that what's really hard for me as a writer is that when I write a play, and it's also because of kind of like where I'm at right now in my career, and that Boston is a small city, so it's big, but it's also small, so I know a lot of people from working in stage management and from, working as a playwright in Boston for about 5-6 years now. So I'll write something and I can email a bunch of friends and be like, hey, do you guys want to come over? I'll get a couple bottles of wine and some pizza, and we can read my new play. And all of a sudden cool. it lives. And then maybe there's one person at that reading who I invite that is a director or works for another company and maybe does dramaturgy or is a lit manager, and they, maybe they don't pick it up, but they tell someone who tells someone, and they're like, oh, Cassie has this really interesting new thing. Well, that's the hope. And they're like, yeah. Cassie has this really shitty new thing.
I feel like that's a harder thing probably to do in New York because there's so many people.
Yeah. Well,
and even harder also, in LA, I would imagine.
There's a different community. It's a different, because Boston is so tight-knit, it is easy to kind of cross the levels. Like, there are people
because everyone's very supportive of everybody.
Right, and there are people who work, well, yeah, to an extent. There are people who work in the Boston Fringe who also, are do a show at the ART or do a show at the Huntington, which is, like they're, up playing a role against John Hamm, or, we just had Nick Offerman did
I love that man.
I know. He just did a show in Boston, and I had friends who were in the show, and they're
oh, that's great.
And they get to work
man,
with
I'd love to get him on this podcast. Just have some scotch with that guy.
It would be amazing.
Oh my god, I love that man.
And then I would love to meet Megan Mullally, so we'd be, I'd come by.
I would also
Not that they always hang out together, but So because of that, it's really, as a playwright and as a playwright producer, like, it's really exciting because I can hear my work pretty quickly. Like, I've access to hear my own work.
Right, that's very cool.
And to develop my work. Whereas in the film world, it's like my feature-length film will sit in my computer forever and forever and forever and forever until, it either gets accepted to some sort of competition, or someone comes out of the woodwork and decides they want to read a script of mine and maybe wants to produce it or wants me to write something. It just kind of, the life of a screenplay is kind of like, wah, wah, It's a lot of work, the writing, right. And there's very little payoff. With shorter films, there are opportunities to make films, and I'm getting into that right now. But with plays, it's so much easier, and they're just And they're like 10-minute play competitions and festivals all over the
Now, I know you do
world.
some plays in New York from time to time. Is it harder to break into the theater world in New York?
I think for sure. I mean, this is one of the reasons why I didn't move to New York, because being from here, everyone was like, oh, when you graduate school, you're going to move back to New York, right? And I was like, everyone and their mom who wants to do theater moves to New York. It's just like you've got people from Ohio and you've got people from, I don't know, Botswana, who are like, maybe. Who are like, I want to be an actor. I'm going to move to the big city, and I'm going to try to get on a Broadway show, or whatever they're trying to do. And it's the same with playwrights. I mean, first off, there are a lot of really great playwriting programs in New York, and different fellowships and writers' rooms and stuff like that. So everyone kind of flocks into the city, and then it's this huge, pool of fish.
Right, there's like an oversaturation.
Right, with so few opportunities. Whereas staying in a city like Boston, especially if you kind of like say like I'm staying here, like I'm committing to this city and to also developing the new play network of this city, and the new play scene of the city, which is something that I've been very committed in doing and supporting other writers and getting their work produced and trying to help other playwrights learn how they can make their work happen, because I think in New York, and I don't really know, but at least my understanding, I think it's harder to self-produce in New York and get the same recognition. So staying in Boston, I've been able to kind of create my own network, and it's taken time, but just landing my fellowship this year and getting to work at, I'm at New Rep, which is the theater in Watertown and right outside of Boston, and I'm a fellow there, and I'm developing my play Dream House, and it's like, I have Bridget, Kathleen O'Leary, who is like, she's so hard on me, but it's amazing because my play, and I'm not very precious about my work either, so especially in this development process, so like I'm just like coming in with draft, and I'm like cutting this and changing that and just coming in with like new stuff. Like I actually texted her 2 mornings ago, and I was like, oh my god, what if Jimmy, who's a character in the play, is actually a girl? Not that I'm saying that he's like, the character is really a girl the whole time, but like, what if this character that I've been writing and I've been struggling with finding how to connect like a couple dots in the play, what if it's because this character should be a girl, and that would actually make this storyline and this other storyline make more sense?
Yeah, just don't take him to Mississippi.
So I went in the next morning and I changed all the names, and I changed to Sammy, and all the names are Sammy, and I changed a couple, where it says like he does this, and I changed it to she does that. And the character still says, one of my favorite lines that this character says, you've got a stick so far up your ass, you got to take it out and fart freely. And when a guy says that, it's like, oh, that's so funny. When a girl says that, it's like, what?
Yeah.
And it is that very, like, Broad City. When I was watching Broad City, I'm like, it's okay, because this is that character. Like, she just says what she's gonna say.
Yeah, it sounds like an Alana-type character.
Totally. Like, she doesn't give a shit. And the play was really funny, and it still works with Jimmy being Jimmy, but I think I'm gonna be able to tie some other things together with the character being a woman. And then it gives me another opportunity to write a role for a woman, because, men have enough roles in life.
Sure.
It's
It's odd how many of my podcasts end up in a talk about feminism.
Oh, yeah.
I guess technically this is only the second one, actually, so I shouldn't say it's odd how many, because that's not that many. Well, and we can totally go there if you like.
We can rack up a couple more, though, if you want. Like, when you talk to Mike, my husband, who is a music producer, you can get into a conversation with him about feminism. You can interview Godzilla.
I'm more than happy to. You know what? I'd really like to talk about feminism with Emma Watson.
Oh, you love Emma Watson.
I've been a fan, but yeah, no, I wouldn't even. I would just like to have like cool people on the show, and
yeah,
she's done really cool stuff on that front. I'm actually a really big fan of what she's done on that front.
So one would say you support feminism.
I think one would say I am a feminist. I don't know why that's so weird for you.
Get out of town. No, I'm kidding. It's the beard. The beard is just,
the beard doesn't make me look. The beard does not make me look particularly feminist. That's true. But let it be known as of this moment.
I'm just saying, burn your bra. Like, burn your bra, soul. Just burn it.
I did.
You did?
Yeah.
I'm glad.
It was an accident, though. Sorry, we totally went off on a tangent there.
That happens. I'll just continue to steal all the material, though.
Please do. And by the way, I'm a huge fan of tangents, so we're welcome to do that as well.
Okay.
But who are your favorite playwrights and people who have really inspired you?
Woo! That is such a tough question. It changes all the time, and I think it's also because I'm reading more and more and seeing more and more, like, the more I'm invested in my career as a playwright.
Of course.
And, it's good that playwrights are getting their work produced and getting their work out there, so, there's always someone new coming around, like, right, I just saw a play by Steve Yockey, and I was like, oh, I've only read his work, and now I'm seeing his play, Blackberry Winter, which was really fascinating, and I'm like, oh, man, he writes really interesting, like, things that just, it seems like it's a play about a woman talking about her mother with Alzheimer's, but then there's this, like, magical realism thing where he writes about this, like, shadow puppet, either, like, a shadow puppet show of this story that she's telling, which she's, like, it's made up this origin story, and it's, like, a mole and a crane, and it's, like, written into the script, like, it should be shadow puppets or animation. And I'm like, oh, that's just a really cool way to think about writing and work. Like, you don't have to say, it has to be this and blah, 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 blah. Or, like, you don't have to say to yourself, like, oh, well, no one's going to want to produce that. So new stuff is coming out. But, of the old stuff, I'm a huge fan of Samuel Beckett. And I think it's just, I worked in a production of Waiting for Godot as an assistant stage manager, like 10 years ago at this point, which is crazy pants. And it just, like, there's so much sadness in Beckett's work. And I lived in Ireland for a little while, so I also feel like I have, like, that, like, the kindred to the Irish writers. But there's, like, a sadness and a darkness, and there's also so much humor and wit. And my like, favorite playwright right now really is Martin McDonagh, who just writes really dark, scary shit. And his play The Pillowman is, like, one of the creepiest, freakiest plays ever. But again, there is, like, some weird humor in it. There's a lot of stuff out there that's really exciting.
I would imagine you have a lot more than just one. I was just curious if there were some specific ones that came to mind, like they did.
Yeah.
How about authors of novels or books or stuff, not necessarily plays?
I love Paul Auster. I'm such a sucker for metafiction, like fiction that acknowledges that it's a book being written and stuff like that. And Paul Auster, his books date back, like, early publication is, like, in the 70s and through the 80s, and he had a memoir-ish book released, I think, like 2 years ago. But his stuff is also just, like, dark and weird, but he has this one book that I'm obsessed with where it, like, acknowledges that, like, this character gets a check in the mail to Paul Auster, and the character's name is not Paul Auster, and he, like, pretends to be Paul Auster so that he can, like, keep this check, and then
the breaking of the fourth wall kind of thing.
Totally, yeah, in books. And I'm really into, I've just read a couple of books by Emily St. John Mandel. She has this incredible book called Station 11, so I just read that, and I'm in love with it, and it's about, like, post-apocalyptic.
Oh, I love post-apocalyptic stuff.
I know, and it's, like, a post-apocalyptic, like, band of, well, it is sort of a band, but it's, like, a band of theater artists and musicians who are, like, traveling through the country and going into all these little settlements of post-apocalyptic people. That book was really exciting. I read another book of hers, Last Night in Montreal. I love a sense of magical realism. I love realism, and I love a little hint of magic or something that goes on that feels sort of unreal.
Right.
And I do a lot of that in my writing, with I Shut Door Open, like, there are these hauntings that happen in the play.
Yeah, there are some interesting things that happen there that were, that sort of came out of the blue, and you're like, whoa, wait, what's going on?
Right, yeah. And it just
Great play, though, really. I'm not a huge, and I hate to say this on a podcast, but I'm going to be honest, I don't generally tend to be a huge fan of plays. But
because you haven't seen good creepy ones yet.
Well, that's the other thing. I haven't been exposed to enough of them.
Yeah.
I think most of the plays I've seen are Broadway plays, and oddly enough, I don't enjoy those.
Well, it's like if you're not into musicals, you're not into, like, commercial theater or whatever that means, then it's hard. It's hard to feel like access. Plus, when you go into a theater, this is my feeling at least, and of course, I would love one day to have, like, 2,000 people seeing my show at one time.
Right.
But, like, when you go into a theater that seats 1,000 people or something like that, seats 800 people, it can sometimes take that personal connection.
That's
and
interesting.
It almost has that film quality where, like, For
That's
example,
true. That's actually very true, because when we saw ESDA, what were we, like 40 people in there?
Yeah, our max, I think our max capacity was like 43 for
Yeah,
that
and
show.
there was no stage. They were just kind of there, and it was very personal.
Yeah,
and I did kind of like that more. And ESDA, as I told you, was one of the best plays I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And I don't throw out compliments willy-nilly.
You want to be able to like smell the sweat and feel the spit of the actors, and you're like kind of there. But I'm saying, like, you know, when you go to the movies and there's someone sitting next to you or behind you and they're talking and you're like, oh, this is killing the experience for me of the film. When you go to the theater and someone's, especially in a small theater, and people are talking, it's not only ruining the experience for the other audience members. Those actors are live people who are you are paying them to do a service for you. The service is to entertain you in some way. I stage managed a show a couple years ago, and these people that I worked with in a day job that I had at the time were, like, really supportive. And they're like, we're going to come see your show. And I was like, okay. And they came to see the show, and I appreciated that they came to see what I had been working on and, you know, like, leaving early to go do. But they sat there in an audience that also maybe sat, like, 80 people. And it was a Thursday, so maybe there were only 40 people there.
Right.
And the actors are maybe 14 feet away from them at most.
Yeah.
And they're sitting there the whole show talking to each other loudly and not about the show.
That's so much worse than in a movie.
Exactly. And so afterwards, you know, our boss took us out to get a drink, and he's like, please come with us, Cassie. We'd love to talk to you about the show. And I felt kind of obligated because, you know, he was paying my bills at the time.
Right.
So I went, and they were like, you know, people kept shushing us, and we couldn't believe, like, blah, blah, blah. And I had a drink also. So I was a little, things came out of my mouth maybe a little faster than I wanted to.
And that was the last day you worked there?
Oh, pretty close, actually.
Oh, yeah?
Not for that reason. I was just like, get me out of here. But they were like, well, I don't understand. We paid to be there. Why can't we talk?
Wait, seriously? They didn't understand?
Oh, they didn't understand why they were...
Like,
an usher came over to yell at them and tell them to be quiet, or that they would have to leave the theater. And they were like, but we paid for this, you know? Like,
yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, which I find interesting, where they don't even realize that they're being rude.
And it's like, that's a live person. That is a live person. But it's like if you went to the dentist, right? And the dentist, you're paying the dentist to fix your tooth, right? And you're sitting there, and you invite a friend to come to the dentist with you, because, you know, you do that.
Who doesn't? And you're sitting there, and you are trying to have a conversation with your friend while the dentist is trying to work on your mouth. And the dentist is like, oh, can you stop moving your mouth? Because I'm actually, like, going to like, hit your lip if you keep moving your mouth. Right. And you're like, but I paid for you to do this. That's a good analogy.
I paid to sit here right now.
Yeah.
And it's like...
No, I don't think you even have to explain it to most people. I think most people understand why that's rude. I've never... And again, I haven't been to a lot of plays, but I've never sat in a play where people are talking to each other. And even in a Broadway play, people are quiet. So to go to a play like that with 40 people around and talk, it's kind of rude.
I think that also, it kind of goes to this, like, what I feel is a problem with in general theater education. And as someone, so I teach 1st and 2nd grade now, and I run the drama program at the school I teach at, and I'm hoping to get more teaching jobs, but I see, at least from my own experience especially, but I'm seeing it happening now, the plays that we went to see when I was in middle school and high school and stuff like that, you know, we went to see, like, and look, they're good for what they're good for. But, you know, we went to see, like, the community production of Noises Off, or The Diary of Anne Frank, or The Miracle Worker, or even we went to see a Shakespeare, but the way that the Shakespeare was done for this high school audience was so dry and bland and unrelatable that, like, you know, we sat there, and even I as a kid, but my friends, the people I grew up with, is like, theater sucks. Like, this sucks. Yeah. Like, we have to sit here and be quiet and watch, like, The Miracle, like this bad community theater's production of The Miracle Worker.
That actually might be part of the reason. I feel like sometimes we're forced as children to, quote unquote, enjoy plays. Yeah. Like, go sit there, shut up, don't talk, and of course you grow to hate it. Just like, well, in the vein of what we were talking about before, where I don't do things where people told me to do. Throughout all of high school, I would not read any books.
Oh yeah,
I love reading now. Yeah, this is a true story.
I wrote so many papers in high school, like so many reports on things I didn't read.
Oh, me too. I was
all through elementary.
First of all, that's not true.
I didn't really start reading for enjoyment until like 11th grade. And people are like, "But you're a writer."
For me, it was probably even later.
Well, but you're not a writer.
No, I'm not.
So, like, I work for a company right now in Boston. I work for this company called Actor Shakespeare Project. And it's a Shakespeare company. They've been around for about, like, 12 years. And one of the things that they do with their plays, like, they'll do a production of, now I'm, like, even though I've worked for them a billion times, I'm, like, blanking on it. But they'll do, like, a really cool production. They did Comedy of Errors, but they set it in, like, a carnival.
Okay.
And so, like, there was the whole story of they're doing the play Comedy of Errors, which is this, like, really kooky, ridiculous Shakespeare. But they're all dressed as, like, carnival workers, like, old-time carnival workers. And, the Siamese twins, I just did air quotes, these actors that are conjoined by the costume are playing... One of them's playing one character and one of them's playing the other character. So they keep having to turn around. And one of the things that Actor Shakespeare Project does is that they have all these student matinees because they want to engage with high school and middle school audiences and colleges also in a way that makes Shakespeare cool, and their actors are they're just great at that. Like, even my husband, who is not a huge Shakespeare fan, he's seen a couple of the shows I've done as a stage manager there, and he's like, wow, I've never understood Shakespeare before, but I understood that.
Yeah,
like,
I know that, Thomas Middleditch, he's in
Silicon Valley.
Thomas Middleditch is one of the characters in that. He does apparently this kind of Shakespeare improv thing where they improv Shakespeare, and that's the same.
Yeah. Well, there's this great thing going on right now in Boston. It was in the UK, now it's in Boston, and I think they're going to be somewhere in Texas, I think, but it's called Shit-Faced Shakespeare. And basically,
I already like it.
Yeah, basically they have they rehearse. They're doing a specific Shakespeare. So let's say they're doing Midsummer Night's Dream, and every performance, one person switches off being the drunk. So one person gets completely one of the actors gets completely shit-faced.
Yeah. And
they go out and they do the show. So shit goes down. I mean, stuff happens because this actor is completely shit-faced. And it's hilarious and it's enjoyable and people drink and it's not Shakespeare, It's Shakespeare that's fun and relatable and...
That's cool. Another one that I heard that was really cool. I don't remember which of my friends was telling me he did this or she did this. I don't remember who it was. But there's this place, you go to a house and there's a Shakespeare play happening in the entire house. Oh, yeah. And each room is doing a different thing and you just kind of walk into whatever room and you kind of interact with them.
Sleep No More.
Sleep No More, that was it.
Sleep No More, yeah.
That's
they did that. They came and did it in Boston too.
It's really interesting.
It's really cool. So it's this whole new way to interact with old text or text that feels like ancient and different. So the hope is, and my hope is with theater education on a whole front, is that students and kids start to be introduced to stuff in a way that is accessible and exciting and different, and not like, we're going to see this boring Shakespeare and you must sit here and be quiet.
That's a great, what's his name, Ben Stein impression?
Yeah, that's sort of what I was
Clear thinking. Eyes are for...
Yeah. I keep kicking this table.
That's all right.
It's because this table is actually made out of, like, a couple
of
plastic
drawers and
boxes with a circle on top. That's what they say.
All right. I'm probably going to cut this part out because I like the ending of making it accessible to children.
Okay, yeah.
So let's end it there. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, wait. Let's not end on children, because children are kind of meh.
We're not completely done. Now I'm going to ask you to promote whatever the hell you want to promote.
Okay, great. I'm really excited. I hope you keep the part where I say that children are kind of meh.
That's either going to stay in right there. It probably is. It's going to end, and I'm going to probably say, I'm going to cut this part out.
What can I promote? Is that what you're going to tell me to do?
Yeah. Promote anything you want to promote.
Oh my god, I have so many things.
I do. Take your time.
So I'm going to, I don't know when this podcast will be released.
Hopefully it'll be second week in May.
Okay, great.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so my show, I Shut Door Open, which will be in Boston at Warehouse 11, which is actually in Union Square in Somerville. And it is a psychological thriller with 3 actors. Has to do with art and what we do to make our art and whether that is cool or not cool. And by cool, I mean, is it okay to steal someone else's trauma to make your own work? And can we...
It is really good. That's the one play that I saw that I absolutely loved.
Yeah, and it explores like a kind of modern Cain and Abel story. So that's going to be going up May 12th through 26th in Boston. And you can check out more about it at www.ishutdooropen.com. So it's easy. I'm sure you'll get a generalist link somewhere at the end of this
podcast.
Yeah.
In the show notes, you'll have links to pretty much everything she's mentioned that deserves links.
Great. I'll just keep mentioning things that deserve links then. Yeah, so that's coming up. And then if you're in New York in August, and I don't have the dates yet, but I should have them soon. So by the time this podcast is hopefully up, the dates will be listed somewhere here in the show notes.
Again, the show notes, if there's anything you need me to update in the show notes, I'll do that, absolutely.
But my play From the Deep, which is my award-winning full-length play, which is about a Israeli prisoner of war and a Boston graduate student finding themselves in the land of the missing and having to fight for their survival in some sort of a way. So that is a full-length play of mine. It will be going up at the New York City Fringe Festival, which is pretty exciting, and I can't wait to have more information about that.
That is pretty cool.
On top of that, I've got Donkey Dating, which is my short political film, which you can find on YouTube. It's really easy to find. Just search for Donkey Dating, but, you might find some other things when looking for that, so just make sure you're typing it correctly. And last thing, you can check out more about me and my work and what's coming up next for me at my website, which is super easy to find. It's www.cassiemsainuk.com. Yes, it's a .com.
That's SEINUK.
S as in Sam, EI, N as in Nancy, UK. That's what I tell people when I call. And they're like, spell your last name for me.
Anyway, I actually saw on your website, I checked it out, that I am actually on your website.
You are. There's a picture
of me at your wedding singing on the mic.
Yeah. There was once a picture of you blowing fire at my wedding on my website, and then I replaced it with the other one because people were like, how do I get him? And I was like, he doesn't.
I do fire blowing for weddings.
Yeah. If you want to possibly burn down the wedding venue that you're going to have your wedding in, please call.
Yes.
Solak.
If you want a completely non-professional and non-licensed, whether that's a licensed profession or not, I don't know.
Can you fire blower license? Can you fire? Is that a sentence?
That's not a sentence, but I understand what you meant, and I don't know if you are allowed to fire blow without a license professionally. I feel like that, out of all the things that need licenses, that might be one of the ones that should have
it. So
I almost lit my friend's sister on fire.
If you're fire blowing, when you first start fire blowing, are you not cool? But then you get really good at it, you become a fire blowing master.
No,
and you become
here's
really
the thing.
Cool.
Fire blowing goes one of two ways.
Yeah.
You start cool or you die. We don't need to keep on going. Hey guys, thank you so much for listening to the show. I had a great time recording it with Cassie. Check out her play, opening in Boston May 12th, going to May 26th. Eyes Shut Door Open. For more info on how to buy tickets, go to the show notes. You'll have a link there. Check out her show coming to New York, to the New York Fringe Festival sometime in August. We will have more information as well on the show notes once that information is available. Go on her website, check out her stuff. Thank you so much for listening. I'll catch you guys in 2 weeks. I'm not entirely sure which episode I'm going to put out in 2 weeks, so if you want to check later, go on the website on upcoming. We'll announce at some point which episode is coming next. Thank you so much for listening. Have a good one.
One of his plays, and that's a telephone.
Yeah, let's grab that. But not actually. I just said that, and then I'll edit out this part where I say that we're gonna grab it, but somebody else is really grabbing it, and then we'll go back to what we were talking about.
That sounds really good.
I think this is probably gonna be in the outtakes.
Okay, I'm really excited. I'm really excited for the outtake. We could just talk forever.
Yeah.
This is actually a problem. We can talk forever. It's happened in the past.
Do a sign out.
Do a sign out? How do I sign out?
I don't know. Just whatever. Be like
Seacrest out.
Ooh, I like that. Seacrest out.
Yeah, but I'm not.
This is the generalist. Seacrest out. One of the ones I was thinking as a sign up to doing journals, this is the generalist. I don't know.
What is it? It's like TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
I like that. Okay,
yeah, that's from Tigger.
Oh.
Yeah, it's like T-I double gutter.
Yeah, but that's not TTFN.
No, and then he goes TTFN. Ta-ta for now.
Oh, well, that's a fine sign out for me. I don't think we'll get sued for using it.
Okay.
TTFN then.
Ta-ta for now.
Hello.